The 2026 Senate elections are coming up fast. Republicans are looking to defend their 53-seat majority. In today's video, we're going to be filling out the map based on a combination of the latest polls and forecasts in every single race. There are 35 seats up for election. We'll begin by filling in the solid states for both parties where we do not yet have any polling data available. Starting with the Republicans, we have Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, South Dakota, Iowa, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Then in the South, there's Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And finally, in the Midwest, we have Kentucky and West Virginia. Republicans are running for re-election in each of these states, except for Kentucky, where Mitch McConnell is retiring. But that won't matter, as Kentucky is one of the reddest states in the nation. Now, as for the Democrats, they'll safely hold their seats in Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, and Illinois. Up in the Northeast, Delaware, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. Together, those 8 states raise the Democratic seat count to 42, though they trail Republicans, who are now projected to reach 47 seats, with 16 safe states, double that of the Democrats, added to their column as well. That leaves us with only 11 competitive races, a historically low number of seats in which both parties have at least a small chance of winning. That just goes to show how polarized our politics have become, and even among those 11, most lean clearly toward one party or the other. For example, let's start in Alaska, a fundamentally strong Republican state. All 3 major forecasters, with the exception of the less reputable race to the White House, currently rate this race as solidly Republican. That's largely due to Alaska's deep red partisan lean. The state hasn't elected a Democrat to federal office since 2008. And Donald Trump carried the last frontier by 13 points in the 2024 presidential election. Adding to the GOP's advantage, former Congresswoman Mary Peltola, widely considered the Democrats' best potential challenger, is now expected to run for governor rather than take on incumbent Senator Dan Sullivan. That's a significant development, especially considering Peltola actually led Sullivan by 3 points in the only poll conducted here so far. With Peltola out, Sullivan has a much clearer path to re-election. Alaska remains in the likely Republican category for now, bordering on safe, but the state's unique ranked choice voting system introduces just enough uncertainty to keep it from being a lock until we get official word on the Democratic candidate. On a similar note to Alaska, Nebraska is another fundamentally strong Republican state. Donald Trump carried the Cornhusker state by more than 20 points last November, but the only poll here from Democrat-aligned survey group Change Research, released in early April, shows a surprisingly tight race. Incumbent Republican Pete Ricketts leads independent Dan Osborne by just 1 point, 46% to 45%. You might remember Osborne from last cycle when he came within 7 points of unseating longtime Senator Deb Fischer. He proved to be a formidable fundraiser, effectively branding himself as not a Trump Republican, but also not a Democrat, allowing him to appeal to independents, moderate Republicans, and Democrats alike. Ricketts, on the other hand, isn't particularly popular, even within his own party. So if Osborne decides to run again, we could be looking at a genuinely competitive race, especially with 2026 shaping up to be a more favorable cycle for Democrats than 2024. Right now, 3 of 4 forecasters rate Nebraska as solid Republican, with race to the White House again being the outlier, calling it likely Republican. Given the polling and Osborne's past performance, I'm inclined to agree with the latter. Nebraska goes down as likely Republican on our map. Also in the likely Republican column is Texas, where things are actually even more complicated. Attorney General Ken Paxton has officially mounted a primary challenge against incumbent Senator John Cornyn, setting up a major clash between the Texas Republican Party's establishment wing and its hardline conservative faction. Cornyn and Paxton have clashed for years, with Paxton criticizing Cornyn for being insufficiently conservative, while Cornyn has openly highlighted Paxton's legal troubles, including his 2023 impeachment by the Republican-controlled Texas House. President Trump has yet to endorse either candidate, and it's unclear whether he will. If he does, whoever receives his backing would likely become the primary favorite. If Trump stays out, we're probably headed for one of the most competitive Senate primaries in recent memory. Paxton has led every poll conducted so far, and by double digits in 6 of the 7 surveys. But Cornyn holds the incumbency advantage, boasts endorsements from several prominent U.S. senators, and has amassed a substantial war chest. Right now, the prediction market Kalshi gives Paxton about a 3 in 4 chance of winning, and that could have significant implications for the general election. If Cornyn prevails, he'd likely secure re-election by double digits, but if Paxton is the nominee, the race would tighten, especially if Colin Allred or Beto O'Rourke jumps in on the Democratic side. Even though Texas shifted significantly to the right between the 2020 and 2024 presidential elections, with Trump winning by 14 points, it's worth remembering that each of the last 3 Senate contests in Texas were decided by single-digit margins. Right now, 2 forecasters have Texas rated as solid Republican, 1 as likely Republican, and 1 as lean Republican. Without a general election poll yet, we'll mark Texas down as likely Republican for now, based on those combined ratings. Now, with just those 3 predictions locked in, Republicans are already projected to retain their Senate majority with 50 seats. Remember that the vice president breaks any ties in the Senate, so right now that power would go to Republican J.D. Vance. Let's move on now through the upper Midwest. So starting in Minnesota, incumbent Democrat Tina Smith is retiring, setting up the first open Senate race in Minnesota since 2006. Republicans haven't won a federal election here since 2002, but Minnesota is consistently competitive, often decided by single-digit margins. In terms of the candidates, for Democrats, both Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Congresswoman Angie Craig have declared their intention to run, with several more potential candidates still in the mix. Flanagan is clearly favored over Ogle when it comes to endorsements, fundraising, and the lone poll conducted so far. On the Republican side, the frontrunner is former NBA player Royce White, but he just lost last year's Senate race against Amy Klobuchar by nearly 16 points. Don't read too much into the battleground rating by Inside Elections. They've only used solid or battleground labels so far this cycle. The lean Democratic rating from the 3 other major forecasters is far more accurate, and that's what we'll go with here on our map. Now over to Michigan, where we have yet another open race following the retirement of Democrat Gary Peters. This one poses more of a challenge for Democrats, especially after Trump carried Michigan this past November by about 1 point. Both parties have had success in Michigan recently, but Democrats have been stronger outside of presidential races. They currently hold both U.S. Senate seats, all statewide executive offices, and control the state Senate. Republicans haven't won a Senate race here since 1994, but this is probably their best opportunity since then. With 2020 presidential Cinderella Pete Buttigieg and outgoing Governor Gretchen Whitmer both declining to run, Democrats are without a clear big-name candidate. Right now, Congresswoman Haley Stevens is the front-runner among declared candidates, although Attorney General Dana Nessel would likely take over that spot if she decides to run. On the Republican side, former Congressman Mike Rogers is expected to be the nominee. He ran a strong campaign in 2024, coming within 0.3 of a point of defeating Alyssa Slotkin in another open seat battle. As long as Republicans don't blow it by nominating someone like Tudor Dixon, they'll have a really good shot at flipping this race. Our 3 major forecasters have the race down as toss-up, while Race to the White House says it tilts Democratic. The only head-to-head poll so far is from Target Insight in early March, showing Rogers leading Stevens by 6 points. Another poll from Mitchell Research in mid-March shows Rogers trailing Dana Nessel by 1 point. Given there's a real chance Nessel enters, I'm going to split the difference between all these data points and simply place Michigan in the toss-up column for now. You'll have to wait for the end of the video to see my own personal rating for this race. Alrighty, now wrapping things up here in the Midwest with Ohio, where we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine appointed Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Vance, and Husted is now running as an unelected incumbent. On the Democratic side, former Congressman Tim Ryan appears to be gearing up for a gubernatorial run, fueling speculation that newly ousted Senator Sherrod Brown might attempt a political comeback after losing his 4th-term bid to Republican Bernie Moreno by about 3.5 points. Brown would likely be Democrats' only real shot at flipping this seat, though even then he'd still enter as the underdog against Husted. All three reputable forecasters currently have this race rated at least likely Republican, and Husted has led Brown in both hypothetical matchups polled so far by Bowling Green University, by 6 points in February and by 3 in April. So, based on those data points, I'm placing Ohio in the likely Republican column for now, especially given that Brown hasn't even confirmed he's running. That said, if he jumps in, I wouldn't be surprised to see this race tighten and shift back toward the lean category. Shifting gears toward the Northeast, starting in Virginia, it's a race that entirely hinges on whether the sitting Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, enters the race. Incumbent Senator Mark Warner is a strong candidate with a substantial fundraising total, and with Youngkin's intentions still unclear, all four forecasters have it down as safe Democrat. The only poll here was surveyed by VCU, which shows Warner leading Youngkin by 8 percentage points from back in mid-January. That would translate toward a likely Democrat rating, but again, it's entirely contingent on whether Youngkin enters the fold. His presence alone is enough to keep it there until he makes a decision. Up in New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is the first to enter the race to succeed her. He's likely to remain the most prominent Democrat in the field. Unfortunately for Republicans, former Governor Chris Sununu has decided not to run. He would have been the party's strongest contender by far. Instead, it looks like former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown will likely win the Republican nomination. He's a strong candidate in his own right, and should give Pappas a real challenge. But in the absence of any polling, we'll defer to the experts. 3 of 4 forecasters currently rate this race lean Democratic. And given that Republicans haven't won a federal race here in over 15 years, that's what we'll go with on our map. And finally, to Maine, where incumbent Republican Susan Collins continues to be a political unicorn. Back in 2020, nearly every poll and analyst predicted her defeat, yet Collins defied expectations and beat Democrat Sarah Gideon by 8 points, and she did it on the same ballot Joe Biden carried Maine by 9 points. She remains the only Republican to win a Senate race in a state carried by the Democratic presidential nominee since 2004. Now in 2026, Maine is the only Republican-held Senate seat in a state Kamala Harris won, and it's widely considered Democrats' best pickup opportunity. Their strongest potential challenger would have been Congressman Jared Golden, but he's decided to run for re-election in the 2nd District instead. Without Golden, Democrats' best option is outgoing Governor Janet Mills, but she has said she has no plans to run for Senate. In the absence of any new polling, we'll again lean on the experts. 2 forecasters have Maine as a toss-up, and 2 have it as lean Republican, so we'll split the difference and place Maine in the tilt Republican column. That leaves North Carolina and Georgia, the 2 most high-profile Senate races to watch this cycle. In North Carolina, Republican Tom Tillis is seeking a 3rd term, though he may face a primary challenge. The state's Republican Party officially censured Tillis over his bipartisan support for gun control and same-sex marriage, and former RNC co-chair Lara Trump has been floated as a potential challenger. On the Democratic side, outgoing Governor Roy Cooper is widely expected to enter the race, which would be a best-case scenario for Democrats. Cooper maintained strong approval ratings throughout his 2 terms, enjoys built-in name recognition, and has a well-established fundraising network. If it's Tillis versus Cooper, expect an extremely close race, and that's reflected in the polling. Cooper has led in all 4 public polls released so far, but by tight margins, ranging from +1 to +4. Looking specifically at the 3 most recent polls conducted in March and April, Cooper leads by 2, 3, and 4 points. That being said, 3 of 4 forecasters have the race down as a toss-up, with only Cook dissenting, and they have it down as leaning Republican. Put all that together, and I think it's only fitting for North Carolina to join Michigan as a toss-up on this map. Finally, down in Georgia, Republicans have their own version of Roy Cooper, outgoing Governor Brian Kemp, But he just declined to run for the Senate, handing a massive blow to what would have been the Republicans' best pickup opportunity of the 2026 midterms. Kemp was arguably an even stronger candidate than Cooper. But now, Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff has the upper hand over any potential Republican opponent. Ossoff is a proven fundraiser and electoral overperformer. He's also led the most likely Republican nominee, Congressman Buddy Carter, by wide margins in the 3 polls thus far. Our 3 main forecasters have the race down as a toss-up, but those ratings are dated back to at least early March. I'll place Georgia down as tilting blue here for now, so based on the ratings and available polling, Republicans are on track to win 52 seats, while Democrats would sit at 46, with the races in Michigan and North Carolina too close to call at the moment. Obviously, this is an extremely early snapshot in time, and we don't yet have substantive polling in many of these key races, so things are sure to shift over the next year. If you were to ask me my personal opinion about which way these 2 toss-ups lean, I'd probably give Democrats an edge in both right now. In Michigan, because the fundamentals are bluer, and in North Carolina, because Roy Cooper is a stronger candidate than Thom Tillis. Granted, this will all depend on just how favorable a national environment it is for Democrats. If President Trump's approval rating continues to slip and Democrats get strong turnout, they'll be in an even better position. But that does it for today's video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts on this map in the comments and let me know what other videos or topics you'd like to see me cover next. Shout out to my channel members listed in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the content. Check out more of my videos here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.